Welcome back, everyone. Before we start, think about where you were on February 28th, 2026, the morning the United States and Israel launched strikes on Iran. Most people saw the headlines, thought it would be over in days, and went back to their lives. That thought, it will be over in days, is the most dangerous one you can have right now, because 30 days later, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Oil is at $116 a barrel. 3,000 American paratroopers are deploying to the region. And Donald Trump just told the Financial Times that his preference is to take the oil in Iran and seize Karg Island. And every military expert who heard those words said the same thing in response. We have been here before, and we know exactly how this ends. What I am going to walk you through today, step by step, is why seizing Karg Island is not a plan. It is a trap, not as a political statement, as a map. Because once you see the map, you stop watching this as a news story and start watching it as the thing that determines what happens to your gas pump, your grocery bill, and the next 20 years of American foreign policy. Let us get into the video. Start with what Karg Island actually is, because most Americans have never heard of it, and the gap between what it sounds like and what it actually means for the world economy is enormous. Karg Island is a coral outcrop 5 miles long, sitting 15 miles off the Iranian coast in the northern Persian Gulf. That is it. 5 miles of land. You could drive across it in 10 minutes, and through that 5 miles of land flows 90% of everything Iran sells to the world in oil. The island has a loading capacity of roughly 7 million barrels per day. It is not a military base. It is not a city. It is a pipeline terminal and a loading dock. And it is the single most consequential piece of real estate in the current conflict. Here is what Trump said this week, word for word, to the Financial Times. His preference would be to take the oil. He said, maybe we take Karg Island, maybe we do not. We have a lot of options. He then added, if we go in, we would need to be there for a while. That last sentence is the one that matters, because a while is not 3 days, a while is not 3 weeks. In the history of American military operations in this region, a while has consistently meant a decade. Step 1 is the military math. Taking Karg Island is not a bombing run. It is a ground operation. The United States military has already struck more than 90 targets on the island, hitting air defenses, a naval base, and mine storage facilities. That was from the air. Seizing it and holding it is a different calculation entirely. Francis Galgano, a military geography specialist at Villanova University, put the number plainly. You need approximately 5,000 ground combat troops to take and hold the island. The Pentagon is already deploying 3,000 soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division alongside 2 Marine Expeditionary Units to the region. The force structure is being built. But here is what 5,000 troops on a 5-mile island actually looks like in practice. Iran has been preparing for exactly this scenario. Iranian officials publicly said last week they are ready and waiting for a ground invasion. They have been moving additional military personnel and air defense systems to Karg for weeks. They have pre-positioned forces on the surrounding coastline. Malcolm Davis, a senior analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, said it directly to CNN. The Iranians can probably sit back and attack Americans on Karg Island, and casualties will mount up. That is not a fringe opinion. That is the assessment of the analysts who study this for a living. Iran does not need to defeat the American military in a conventional engagement. They need to make the cost of staying on that island higher than the cost of leaving, and the terrain, the preparation, and the math all favor the defender. Step 2 is the oil paradox. Here is the part that most people have not thought through, and it is the part that goes directly to your gas pump. The logic of seizing Karg Island is that cutting off Iran's oil revenue forces Tehran to the negotiating table. That is the theory. The problem is what it does to global oil markets in the meantime. Brent crude crossed $116 a barrel on Monday after Trump's comments landed. That is up more than 60% from the $72 a barrel it traded at before this conflict began. That jump has already surpassed the 46% spike recorded during Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait in 1990, the worst oil shock in a generation, and the strait is still technically open to 20 Pakistani-flagged vessels. Imagine what happens to that number when American soldiers are fighting on the island that handles 90% of Iran's exports. JP Morgan analysts said it in a note published this week. If Karg goes offline, the loss of Iran's storage buffer and the scarcity of viable export alternatives would rapidly trigger upstream shut-ins across major Southwest oil fields. Up to half of Iran's 3.3 million barrels per day of production could be at risk from day one. There is no 20-day buffer. It vanishes immediately. That is not a projection. That is JP Morgan doing the arithmetic on the global oil market's most vulnerable single point. Gas at the national average of $3.99 a gallon right now does not stay at $3.99 if KARG goes dark. Every economist who has run this scenario says the same thing. The number goes up significantly, and it goes up for everyone. Step 3 is the retaliation chain. Iran has already attacked all 6 Gulf Cooperation Council countries in a single coordinated wave: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. For the first time in 40 years of restraint, Iran hit Gulf soil directly, and they have been explicit about what comes next if KARG is invaded. Iranian officials warned that any ground operation on their islands would shatter all restraint. Think about what that phrase means when you are already looking at the entire Gulf under fire. Shatter all restraint means the desalination plants that provide 90% of Kuwait's drinking water become targets. The plants that supply 70% of Saudi Arabia's water. The plants that support 100 million people across a region that cannot survive without them. Iran is not threatening to defend KARG Island. Iran is threatening to make the entire Gulf uninhabitable as the price of an American ground operation. One expert said it directly. Striking and destroying KARG Island would likely invite massive Iranian retaliation on the energy infrastructure of the Arab states of the Persian Gulf, beyond what we have seen so far. Beyond what we have seen so far. From a conflict that has already hit airports, industrial plants, and luxury districts across 6 countries in one night. Step 4 is the exit question. Trump said American forces would need to stay on KARG Island for a while. Christian Emery, a professor specializing in U.S.-Iran relations at University College London, described the gamble precisely. Trump would be betting that the remaining Iranian leadership, faced with the loss of tens of billions in annual revenue, would capitulate. Military success, he added, is by no means guaranteed. But here is the deeper problem with that bet. Iran has already absorbed the killing of its supreme leader. It has absorbed strikes on 26 of its 31 provinces. It has absorbed the destruction of its air force, its navy, and its radar systems, and kept fighting anyway. A government that has survived all of that is not a government that capitulates because it lost one island. It is a government that turns the occupation of that island into a 30-year recruiting campaign. History has a word for what happens when great powers seize a piece of territory in someone else's homeland and announce they are staying for a while. It is not victory. Ask the Soviet Union what happened in Afghanistan. Ask the United States what happened in Iraq. In Iraq, the military plan worked. Shock and awe succeeded. Baghdad fell in 3 weeks, and then the occupation began. And the occupation lasted 8 years and cost 4,500 American lives and $2 trillion, and left behind a country that today is home to Iranian-backed militias attacking American bases. Military success did not produce strategic victory, it produced strategic catastrophe. KARG Island is 5 miles long. It is not Baghdad. It is smaller, more isolated, and surrounded by Iranian forces who have spent weeks preparing to turn it into the most expensive piece of real estate in American military history. Step 5 is what this means for you. You are already paying $4 a gallon at the pump on a conflict that has not yet put a single American boot on Iranian soil. The OECD revised its global inflation forecast upward this week because of this war, projecting the average inflation rate across G20 economies will soar to 4% this year. Australia has already cut fuel taxes to cushion the blow. Britain's Prime Minister is holding emergency meetings with oil executives. Spain closed its airspace to American military planes. These are not signals of a conflict being contained. These are signals of a conflict that is spreading into the economic foundation of every country on Earth. A ground operation on KARG Island does not end that pressure. It multiplies it at a scale that every analyst who has run the numbers says the world has not seen since the 1970s. Here is what I want to leave you with. Trump has now set a deadline of April 6th. Open the Strait of Hormuz or the United States will obliterate Iran's power plants, oil wells, and Karg Island. The Iranians say there are no real talks. The April 6th clock is running, and sitting behind every diplomatic statement and every missed deadline is the decision that changes this conflict permanently, not the bombing, the boots. Watch the troop numbers. When the 82nd Airborne and the Marine Expeditionary Units are fully in position, the window for a ground operation is open. Watch what Iran does to Gulf infrastructure between now and April 6th. Every strike on a desalination plant or an energy hub is Iran reminding Washington of the price of escalation. Watch the oil price. If it crosses $120 a barrel before a deal is reached, the economic pressure on the administration to end this quickly becomes the pressure to escalate it, to end it faster. That logic has started every military overextension in modern history. This story is still being written. And the next chapter is being decided right now in rooms where nobody is announcing what they have decided. The people watching the dominoes closest are the ones who will not be surprised when the next one falls. See you in the next one.